Time doesn't erase murder. It just hides it better. They said the case was closed. They said no one was watching. But someone always is. This is Santana True Crime.
Welcome to Santana True Crime. Tonight, we're revisiting one of the most talked about cases in the country, the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie. And there have been several significant developments that deserve a closer look. We're going to break down the new information about the ransom communications that investigators now believe may have come from an actual abductor, including the first demand for $4 million, the increase to $6 million, and the later message claiming that Nancy had died shortly after she was taken. We'll discuss what investigators have said, what remains unconfirmed, and why these letters could become some of the most important pieces of evidence in this case. We'll also examine a detail from Savannah Guthrie's interview that hasn't received nearly enough attention. She revealed that when her family members arrived at Nancy's home, the back door was propped open. At first, they believed Nancy may have suffered a medical emergency, that paramedics had been there. But as they looked around the home and saw Nancy's phone and purse still inside, blood outside the residence, and the missing security camera, they quickly realized something far more serious had happened. We'll discuss why that detail could be important and what questions it raises from an investigative standpoint. Finally, we'll talk about another growing concern in this case, the flood of people online claiming they know who the suspect is or that they have inside information. We'll discuss the difference between verified evidence and internet speculation, how false claims can consume investigative resources, and the real impact they have on innocent people and the Nancy's family. As always, our goal tonight is separate fact from speculation, look at the evidence through an investigative lens, and have a respectful discussion about where this case stands today. With me today is my co-author and brother, Dr. Brian Santana. He is the author of A Murder on Campus, a professor of the cop in North Carolina's most notorious cold case. He's also a true crime professor. Dr. Brian, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Good to be here talking about a case that has lots of interesting developments. It seems like coming out every week at this point.
It does. And I think that coming out every week is good for the case and also concerning. And the concerning point that I have is that last week we were talking about the tip, I'll call it.
Yeah.
I don't even think you can even say that, but that someone had reported that Nancy was buried in Mexico. And it received national attention.
Right.
But none of this is verified information. And this is not the sheriff's department that's reporting this.
Yeah.
These are online communities that are reporting this to news agencies, and the news agencies are running it like the investigators have given a press conference on this.
Yeah, no, it was the tip last week. I mean, I think what's interesting about that tip was just that, buried in Mexico. I mean, those who are following this probably saw that they discovered a number of bodies, and they discovered a number of bodies.
26.
That's crazy. Yeah, so it's and even just saying that, like, she's buried in Mexico, like it sounds as vast and as vague as saying she's buried somewhere in the state of Arizona. Like it's kind of
right.
And it always to me reminds me that how little we have in this case when we get to the point like, oh, she might be buried somewhere across the border in a mass grave, or oh, she might be buried in the desert. It feels like there's a lot of people working really hard to extract a story. And I feel like a conversation we had last week was just that I think most people agree that this was a financially motivated crime, or at least many of us are working under the assumption. Whether that's correct or not, I don't know. But I think most of us are working under the assumption it's a financial crime in some way. And it feels like for the past months, it's been an effort to find proof of the actual financial motive and looking for ransom notes or trying to verify ransom notes or trying to find some financial angle, which is really odd, I think, in a case like this, because generally, when we're talking about a ransom or we're talking about financially motivated crime, you typically don't have to work hard to discover that the person has a financial motive. And it's not verified publicly, at least in this case, that that's what's going on.
And that's where it gets very interesting with the first letter being sent to TMZ.
Yeah.
And the letter, now we've got information that they demanded $4 million at by a certain date. That date wasn't revealed. And then if that money was not received, then increased to 6 million. And if they didn't receive it by a date for the 6 million, then they were going to take her life. And that just seems like an incomplete thought if this really was a true ransom.
Right.
If your goal is a true ransom, first of all, why are you going to TMZ?
Yeah.
And second, you gave no proof of life. We don't even, how do we know that you even have her? You know, there's those missing details that I think most people would assume that you're going to receive before you give over $4 to $6 million.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think with a ransom, typically law enforcement is going to be acting as the kind of third party intermediary between the family and the person who is the kidnapper in this case, or the person who's the abductor, I guess, more appropriately with Nancy Guthrie. But it's weird to send it to TMZ because TMZ is going to forward it to the FBI. The FBI will then have to do verification about whether it's authentic. And I guess the weird thing about it is, like you were saying, if this is a time sensitive transaction, if you don't address it by this date, then there's this penalty implied. Why not just send it directly to the FBI, or the sheriff, or the people that are investigating this? They're publicly out there giving fairly regular press conferences and are fairly known. I mean, we know the numbers for calling in tips. Like, why send it to the place that is, having, the celebrity gossip rag and, like up there with stories about, conspiracy theories about Hulk Hogan's death and stuff like that. Like, it's just a weird, I don't know what the benefit would be if your goal is to get this information and communicate as quickly as possible with the Guthrie family to get money.
And another kind of side piece to that is we haven't seen, there may be more to this letter than what's reported. There's always that kind of caveat with all this, because those letters have not been made public besides what people have seen on them and what they've reported. And I don't know if they were told to exclude information. We know that with the second letter, a reporter out of Arizona named Brianna Whitley actually saw the letter in person. And I don't know if this caused her to be fired or if she quit, but regardless, now she works for Crime Junkie, the podcast show. And she said that what she saw was, quote, on the letter, "We never intended to hurt her in all of this. She perished," and they used the word perished, "shortly after she was taken. She is buried in nature. We are truly sorry this has happened."
Well,
And
the
so
interesting
no demand or anything.
And that plays along with what we said last week. If you remember our conversation the other week about this case, I think we had both come to, in different ways, the conclusion that this was most likely a medical emergency of some kind. She wasn't someone that break into the house and murder in the house. It seemed like a strange plot to kidnap an 84-year-old woman with all kinds of health conditions. And I think we had surmised that it made sense that there was likely some medical emergency that occurred very early on, and she was likely deceased. And I think in the language of this letter, if you think about the language of perished, the language of perished isn't a language of murder. Perish is something that happens, incidental to someone else's actions. And so I think when someone describes that she perished, it almost distances themselves from responsibility that they did not actually, their actions did not directly lead to her death, right? I mean, they might have kidnapped her, but they did not actually physically murder her, right? She died in their custody, she perished, but she was not killed or murdered, right? Is that's what it seems like. I mean, it seems to imply that they're stressing that this was not the goal and that something went wrong, which is what we had kind of assumed all along, right?
Right. And they also use the word we.
So more than one, we're talking about more than one person, which we only have the one guy on the security camera that there's been some attention, probably not enough attention focused on, but we had talked about before, like, was this more than one person? This seems to, the first person plural here, the we, seems to suggest that.
And when you combine this, and again, we don't know if that
Mhm.
letter is true, if
Right.
this was just another person trying to get attention. I I personally do not put a lot of weight into these letters just
Mhm.
because there's been several of them, and unless they have provided something in there that we are not privy to,
Mhm.
that is something that has not been made public and would only know if you saw Miss Guthrie or you were in that house and they provided that type of detail.
Mhm.
I don't know if how much can be put behind it, but so take this with a grain of salt that when we look at, we know that at some point you had a person that's wearing a mask
Mhm.
that in a backpack they got from Walmart. There's actually 3 Walmarts in that area,
Mhm.
so that kinda makes sense. We know that he damages the, Ring doorbell,
Mhm.
I believe rips it off, and we've also got this back door that's propped open. So, it made me kind of think about this. Was this I wonder if this was something that he took the doorbell off and
Mhm.
then went around the back for some reason, or if someone else was involved that
Mhm.
went around the back. Because
Yeah.
why would you leave that door? We know that there's blood droplets
Mhm.
in the front of the house.
Mhm.
And so I would think that would be indicative of you're leaving the front door. So, like, that's
Mhm.
your exit.
Yeah.
And so it may be that the rear door was the point of entry,
Right.
and which the advantage to that is that if someone's driving by, they're not seeing a kicked in front door.
That's true. Yeah.
And the other thing that, again, this is common knowledge that when you look at that property,
Mhm.
you'll see it. She's got a beautifully manicured lawn, and you can tell that there's got to be a crew that's keeping this thing
Mhm.
looking the way that it does. We're talking about financial motives.
Mhm.
I think that this is something that needs to be looked at, is that the people that are working in and around
Mhm.
that home,
Yeah.
did they provide any information about um, who her daughter was, or did they know that? Did they know that she has access to a lot of money? That would
Mhm.
be a good motive to attempt something like this.
Yeah, I mean, certainly, if we're talking about more than one person, I think the pool of exactly, and especially with the detail about the door that you mentioned, I mean, it opens up in some ways, it makes the case more complicated. than it was now, because we have more possibilities for. I mean, we're back to the same questions in some ways. Who had access to, or who would have been familiar with the actual house? Who would have, picked out this house versus others for like a financially motivated crime? So it presumes some, I think, some familiarity. I think it's what a lot of people have worked under the assumption. But yeah, if we're thinking about more than one person, it also impacts how we think about the level of coercion that was involved. Because, like you said, there was just a few drops of blood at the scene. It wasn't a big struggle, and she's 84 years old, so um, maybe that's not as important of a detail. But I do think that two people, um, gives us a sense that it's a little bit more thought out than a single person doing this. But also, two people gives us that's two people that have to keep a secret and not one, and that becomes more complicated than a single person keeping it to themselves, I think.
But you know what these notes remind me of
Mhm.
is the John Benet Ramsey note
Yeah.
of how they made it. I think that most people, even though we do not know what happened to John Benet Ramsey,
Yeah.
to be clear, but I think most people assume this is one person,
Mhm.
that this is not a foreign faction,
Yeah.
right? And I think that that's kind of the same approach in a way of not the using the movie quotes like they did in John Bonet, but
Mhm.
making it appear as if there's this organization behind it where
Yeah.
it may be just as simple as uh, what Dr. David said during the first show when we talked about this, that you've got a high
Mhm.
uh, concentration of people that are addicted to meth.
Mhm. Yeah.
And this could be as simple as someone that has a drug problem looking to make a buck to
Mhm.
break into a house, and they just happen to pick her house.
And in that, if that was the case, then I would think that there's a high likelihood that a lot of these notes are hoaxes, right? That are coming through, because I would think a drug break-in, in that case, the likelihood you make a big mistake if it's a drug break-in, things go sideways really quickly. The likelihood that you're going to want to draw more attention to yourself by sending fake ransom notes in a weird attempt to mislead to a major outlet like TMZ and stuff. It just that doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. And I would think if this was kind of that drug related opportunistic kind of crime that went bad, that this would be more likely that these notes were not authentic. But if the notes are authentic, it raises other types of questions about, exactly like we were talking about earlier, why these are going to TMZ. These aren't being sent to the New York Times or Wall Street Journal. They're being sent to a tabloid, and as an intermediary. And if time is of the essence, both for the person's health that you're holding, that you've abducted, but also, you're trying to get this money as quickly as possible. I just don't understand the logic of going through that third party that's just going to forward it to. It's going to create into a um, public facing moment where it's going to get attention all over the internet. Plus, it's just going to get forwarded to the investigative agency.
But I think that's the goal around a lot of these letters. It's not to,
Mhm.
I think the first one may have been, if it's not legitimate, which I don't think it was personally,
Mhm.
just my opinion, I think that maybe that was a very weak attempt to see if they could make a quick buck
Yeah. Yeah.
and claim that they had something that they didn't.
Mhm.
The one where they're talking about how she perished and whatnot,
Mhm.
what's concerning about that is that does seem like just a logical uh, conclusion
Yeah.
when
Yeah.
you're
Right.
looking at this.
Yeah.
And it also, from what was reported, it's not asking for any money. The only thing it's asking for is
Right.
maybe some sympathy.
Right, and that's a great point because I think if this is a financially motivated crime that does kind of that goes bad very quickly in this, and there's some kind of medical emergency that was not intended, it doesn't make a lot at that point. Why are you alerting people or explaining, like, who is that for? Like, I mean, is it because it's not like, look, something bad happened, we didn't intend this, here's where you'll find her body. It's
Right.
not that. It's just that she's she perished. Okay.
And that's
Well,
the odd missing piece about this, right? If
right.
you really were trying to get out of this more or less, if you were a part
Yeah.
of this and it was a group, I understand that maybe this happened, but you're not gonna get any type of, leniency
Mhm.
without producing a body and without naming who was involved.
Right.
And so, at best case, maybe I don't think this is out of sympathy. This feels like
Mhm.
it's like a half-ditched effort to distance yourself from
Mhm.
being involved in it if it's legit. This could be completely bogus.
Right, and then also, if it's more than one person that's involved, is this like a joint letter? Is this one person that had a kind of their conscience was kinda getting the better of them and they sent this? Like, it raises some other questions too.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm wondering of where this is heading next. If
Mhm,
the FBI is actually taking these serious, if there's any way for them to track down these letters, and
mhm,
I would assume that they're looking at the IP addresses
mhm,
um, of where these are coming from. Um, but at the same time, I look, if you send an email from a Starbucks and you're
mhm,
using their Wi-Fi, it's going to be a lot harder to track down than
mhm.
if you're, using your home browser, right?
Right, right.
It's kind of like the internet cafes that the terrorists were using in Afghanistan,
Mhm,
where they weren't able to, um, they were having a hard time locating because it's a public place where people go in and out, and there's not a identifier for that one particular person.
right. Yeah, and it yeah, I think I think that determining whether these letters are authentic or not, I mean, I think I mean, it seems like one of the strange things about this case is that it feels like there's been a very little traction for there's been a lot of coverage, but very little traction. It seems like most of the updates that have been here have been reacting to a new letter that we become aware of, or
That's
was
I
there?
think that's
Yeah.
the key, is
Uh-huh.
that are these really updates?
Right.
These are coming from news sources and podcasters and people that are claiming
Mhm.
to have seen letters. This isn't the actual this is not the FBI
Right,
coming
right.
out and saying that we have gotten this information. We've got a person of interest. He was driving this car, blah, blah, blah. Please help us locate him.
Mhm.
It's not that. It's news agencies coming on and reporting these random letters that are coming in. And I think that that is one of the big issues in this case is what we actually know
Mhm.
about this case where we can confirm that it happened. It's very limited. We've got some
Right.
still photos of the uh, person of interest in a ski mask damaging a camera. We know about the
Right.
blood droplets. We now know about the back door,
Mhm.
and we've got some general time frames, which is
Mhm.
good, but that's about it.
Right.
HD video.
Right, we have
And
and
this is a good point. Sorry to interrupt you, but
mhm,
Justin Thomas, uh, he commented that 2026 no HD video any major intersection at 3 a.m.
No, that's a
And
great point.
I've talked about this before, but just because the FBI or the sheriff's department has something doesn't mean that they're sharing it with us. And I would hope
But
that they would share a video uh,
right.
of a car if they were confident that this was the suspect's video. But
To
this isn't something where we see this on a case by case basis,
right.
where some agencies are more willing to put out information than others, and we just don't know.
But to Justin's point, I think that like a lot of time has gone by, and there was a period in which at least the Pima County Sheriff was having daily press conferences with updates, and I feel like if there was some information like possible cars that they were exploring and others, it just seems like an odd thing to leave out at this point in time because it seemed like they were following up and providing updates with lots of things that amounted to nothing for a period, whether it was, gloves that were found or other things, and like following up with different kinds of leads that they were confirming. And yeah, it's hard to understand that. I mean, the we have the video that was from Nancy Guthrie's home, but in today's, if we think about all the different tech forensics that could take place in this, and the thing that Justin mentioned about the stoplight cameras is one of them, it would be interesting to know kind of what is being done with that. I'm thinking about like the Luigi Mangione case after that occurred. There was something like what, like 48,000 videos. It was some absurd number, the number of cameras that are just in total, like in New York City in all different areas.
Right, but you're
Like,
also talking about a large city,
sure.
and every intersection, I'm sure, has multiple cameras.
And I would be curious in this neighborhood. This is a wealthy neighborhood, though, right? Too. This is a pretty affluent neighborhood. Are there any cameras anywhere else within the vicinity, both leading up to, um, in the neighborhood of this, this area?
And that's where I would think that when they're doing a canvas, right? When
Mhm,
you do a canvas, you're looking for witnesses, and you're also looking nowadays for cameras. So what that looks like is you're knocking on every single door,
mhm,
and you're asking those basic questions about if they saw anything, if they heard anything, that
mhm,
sort of thing. Have they seen anyone suspicious in the area? Have they had work done at their house? That's another common one to ask because of, again, it gives people opportunity to see valuables in people's homes.
right,
And one of the, like Justin was saying, one of the most common questions now is, do you have a doorbell camera or a security system?
right.
But with the intersection cameras, I don't know of how common they're going to be in that area. For example,
Mhm,
I'm in Raleigh, North Carolina. We have cameras on some of the major intersections.
mhm,
And when violent crimes happen, that is a resource that the police department can pull from.
mhm,
They're not at every major intersection. And that's certainly outside agencies in departments surrounding Raleigh do not have that access.
mhm,
Some of the smaller ones, I worked for one small age or two smaller agencies that had cameras up at like their parks, but these were not the same quality that you would in a major department that has more funding. And so if this is a resource issue, I
mhm,
would bet more that things like they're going to be looking at businesses. I think those three Walmarts are going to get hit up a lot because we do know that the backpack that the person was carrying is a
mhm.
Walmart brand. So there are those type of things, but
Yeah,
whether they had a camera like at the end of the street that would have captured
right.
that video or the vehicle traffic, I don't think they do. I think that if they did have a vehicle of a car by now, especially how we went from having 1,000 investigators working this case,
Mm-hmm.
which is insane, to now it's a small task force.
Oh,
So
in the area, I would point out though that there was a development early on this. I'm just looking, I just pulled it up as I remember something about this. This was from the Daily Mail, and this was reported on February 13th, 2026, going to Justin's point. And one of the things that they do point out in this article was they do mention that the city of Tucson did confirm, their Department of Transportation, they um, they have traffic cameras in the area that was immediately around uh, Nancy's home, but those devices don't record cars. So it says Pima County does have cameras that record, but officials note that they are imperfect and may not actually capture license plate details. And so there was it's a bit confusing. So I don't know what the purpose of having a camera would be if it's not going to actually record, but there were cameras in some of the areas near her home, but those devices apparently don't actually record cars. And so that was reported in February 2026 at least.
yeah, so this is just, it sounds like a regular security camera as opposed to a license plate reader. They've got
Mhm,
those on police vehicles as well. We had
mhm,
a couple where you drive down the road and I mean it turns on as soon as you crank the car up,
mhm.
and any
Yeah.
car that you pass by, it's got antennas all around it and it's
Mhm.
picking up every license plate.
Yeah.
And when it picks it up, it's running it to see if it's stolen, its registration, the owner information, and if the person has a warrant or the car is stolen, it alerts you. And
Mhm,
so it's the same type of or similar system with these license plate readers that are at intersections where they're able to gather all that information. And then if
mhm,
you had a vehicle description, you can filter out through that. But
mhm.
those are not cheap, which is why they're not at, every intersection.
Right. That makes sense.
But Justin made another, good point here, and, that is something that we talked about last time was, the pacemaker going off,
Right.
and I do think that that is a good point that they've got this event
Mhm.
that they know of. And I do not know of how much technology is behind that. If
Right.
it's got what I would have loved to have had is a direction of travel with this
Right.
pacemaker.
Right.
But I know that's probably wishful thinking. I simply don't know, honestly. I would be guessing. But we
Mhm.
do know that it's got the time.
Mhm.
Um, got some more friends joining us. Um, what would be important about that, and Justin made a good point about this, is to take that time
Yeah.
and know that, okay, she's away from the house at this point.
Yeah.
So if there are any, like you were saying, the gas stations in the area, places in the neighborhood that we
Right.
know through our canvases have cameras, and going back, and I think that that's going to help help investigators not look through as much video
Mhm.
because you should be able to narrow it down to a window of saying like this is when this event happened,
Mhm.
so we can
Yeah.
go shortly after that and assume that that's when she left the house,
Mhm.
as opposed to just having these hours of gap where we really do not know at what point was she removed from the house.
Yeah, and for those just joining, I saw their comment pop up there. If you all have any thoughts on whatever the latest development, this latest development we've been talking about with the Nancy Guthrie case, we'd love to hear what you all think. We've been talking about some of the recent ransom notes, the fact that it was sent to TMZ, and some of the other the financial nature of this crime that we've all assumed, but just that it feels like a lot of the updates we've been working really hard to find definitively what that financial motive is. And that's a weird thing. Usually with a ransom case is not a mystery. Someone's kidnapped or there's some abduction and there is a ransom note that's given to authorities. Now these are the cases that don't tend to turn out well. I mean, I was telling Cameron before the broadcast, like, think about the last time you saw someone send a public ransom note to a tabloid or to a major newspaper where everything just turned out well and they just lived the rest of their life and were millionaires. They
Right.
don't tend to turn out well, right? And so there's that. But then, but it feels like in this case, we don't even really have. We've been really looking hard trying to authenticate these ransom notes because we're trying to find proof and confirmation that this is a financially motivated crime, but nothing has been definitively confirmed yet.
Yeah, and you would think that if this really was a ransom
Mhm.
and they know of where the body is,
Yeah.
that there would be some type of price to get that body back, because the family
Right.
has made it very apparent that they're willing to pay to get their mother back, whether she's dead or alive.
And that's what's the weird thing that bothers me, because one of the latest tips with this is that there's allegedly some ransom note that we don't know is authentic or not that has stated something to the effect of, well, there is a cell phone that contains the last, what we think was a video taken on the last day that Nancy Guthrie was alive. It also contains information about the identities of the two people that were here. We want 1 Bitcoin in exchange for the location of this phone. Now, I'm very skeptical that this is a legitimate tip, but even then, it just makes you wonder, where is this tip coming from? We saw in one of the ransom notes, it said the first person plural, we. So we're now wondering if it's more than one person, but also, and if it's more than one person, well, two people is a little bit more complicated to keep a secret. Maybe they told someone else and someone else but there's this, and now someone else maybe is trying to extort them. It's hard to understand what is going on with this, but now it seems like if that lead is true, it feels like it's turned into both there's a ransom note saying that she perished, but there's also something that promises to give some details about what actually happened. It feels like it's a very slippery story about, and it's not really clear what the nature of the ransom is supposed to give you, because they're not saying we know the location of her body, here's where it is. Or we're not saying that we'll give you a phone that has some information about her last day. It feels like everything is kind of this third party removed in the same way, let me send this letter to TMZ that I want to eventually get to the family that would pay the ransom.
Right.
It doesn't feel very immediate or urgent. How long does it take to receive? That's a great question. I mean, there are cases in which, I mean, well, maybe you could. I don't know. I'm trying to think about this off the top of my head. How long does it take to receive a reward? The family isn't receiving these communications directly, and
Right.
so the weird thing to me about this, to the person who just made this comment, would be: so you're sending this to the police, are is the person who is sending this reward imagining that the police are going to be acting in good faith and just kind of dropping off a boatload of untraceable money? I don't know what it just doesn't feel like a very wise plan.
Well, using crypto to
Yeah,
gain access to the reward just sounds shady.
right,
Just
right.
because that's probably the best way to hide money.
Uh-huh.
It's not like we were talking about the hijacker before the show. Help me
DB,
out here.
yeah, DB Cooper. Yeah.
DB Cooper, thank you,
Mhm.
who successfully hijacked a plane and got a boatload of cash
Mhm.
that he's stuffing in a suit and sticking in bags and whatnot when he jumps out of the plane. That's something that they could verify that they're actually giving money to an actual person
Right,
who
right,
has hijacked a plane.
right.
If you're giving $1 million, in crypto that could be a 16-year-old kid who went to a Starbucks with a phone that he got from Walmart
Right.
and is sending these messages and created a crypto account and giving them the number to it to send, and that's it. And I don't even know if they've
Right.
even gone that far. From what I've been seeing, it's all been like almost like, in theory, would you give us money?
Well, and at least according to one report I read today, TMZ offered to pay the 1 Bitcoin ransom to get this like cell phone that has this alleged information, and the FBI was allegedly, because I don't know this, discouraging them from say so. Let's see what this says from Justin. Why would the TMZ tipster give access to a cell phone? That phone has a unique ID. It can be pinged for presence. Seems like he's giving TMZ everything they want to hear. No, I think that's a great point. I mean, one of the things we were talking about, Justin, before the show was that why TMZ? Why this isn't the New York Times? It's not the Wall Street Journal or the Washington Post. It's TMZ. This is the same people that were, you know, peddling conspiracy theories about Hulk Hogan's death and stuff. Like, it's just a weird. Um, to go to TMZ first is not exactly the same as going to the National Enquirer, but it's not that far off from that. So it is very strange. It's playing exactly to the kind of story that they would like to tell.
And that's where I, not to interrupt you, but
Yeah.
that's why I feel that these letters or ransom demands are more just people trying to get attention,
Yeah.
because they seem to be all over the place. That to me, I
Mhm.
feel like someone saying I want $4 to $6 million or I'm going to kill someone is a
Mhm.
lot different than an apology and using these words like perish, and that she's now with nature and trying to soften the blow. Like,
Well, saying she's now with nature sounds like a phrase that like a not that's from like a non-English speaker. I mean, like to me, like that's not like a turn of phrase that like would that a English speaker I think would typically use. And we
do you
were
think
talking about
perish
earlier.
is also something that was
Well,
maybe put in like AI or something,
I don't know.
or
I
like
think
a translation?
as we were talking about earlier, so yeah, so like I'm an English professor, so like these kinds of things are language is important to me, but um when you think about a word like perish, it's not killed, it's not like murder, it's not even died. Perish seems to kind of distance the person who's describing the event from the responsibility for that event. So people perish all the time, but it's usually independent of an outside action, right, or factor. So when you're describing someone as perishing, it typically doesn't seem to be due to someone else's actions. And so, um, and so it seems where the person is distancing themselves. But back to your point, I think if this was a ransom where the real goal was to get money just to show them where she's buried, I would think if proof of life is not possible now and they have access to a phone that allegedly has video from the last day she was alive, why not send a clip from the video saying, look, here's a clip of her from the last day she was alive. Send us this money and we'll tell you location of the body.
Yeah, and then you're done.
Yeah.
And then at that point, you could ask for crypto. Um, I agree.
I don't
Well,
think,
I don't think that a
yeah.
reward is going to get paid out, because personally, the longer this goes on, I go back to, this was someone that their motive was to uh,
Hmm.
break into her house
Hmm.
and steal whatever. I don't think this is as sophisticated as it's being made out to be.
Yeah.
And I think that just because we don't know things, we start adding in all these layers, and it's almost like things that aren't true are becoming common knowledge, right?
Right.
Like the whole like Mexico thing. People were reporting that like it was a reality that she is buried somewhere along the border,
Right.
when in fact there's nothing to actually support that.
Right.
There's not a
Right.
picture of her grave. You would think that if you are that person and you want to like you were saying before, if you
Mhm.
want to report that she is and you were involved, that this is where she was buried, why are you not giving a more detailed location if your goal was to have her
Right.
recovered, or to give some type of picture, or say, you know what, she was wearing blue slippers and
Right.
blah blah, providing something to know that you actually know what you're talking about.
Right. You're gonna have to give some information to be taken seriously. You're gonna have to give some information that only someone directly associated with the case would have. I think if you have a video and all these other types of details, that would be the easiest way to do it. I'm deeply skeptical because this was sent to TMZ. This could think about where her daughter works. She works at a Today Show. Why not send it to the Today Show if you want to communicate directly with
And
them?
you know what's another point
So,
about this that
yeah.
people may have overlooked is that if this was just about fulfilling a demand,
Right.
the Today Show, I know at TMZ allegedly at one point offered $1 million for the location of her body too.
Right.
My point is there's plenty of people that would cut a check
Right.
for $1 to $6 million. Like,
Right.
that would not be an issue for a news, channel to write that check, the Today Show.
Right.
I'm sure
Yeah.
they would do that in a heartbeat, and I'm
Yeah.
sure that TMZ would love to pay, or not love, but I'm sure that they'd be willing to pay $1 million, because the story alone would be worth more than that, to be
Right.
able to report that you were the news agency who had the location first.
Right, and it seems like it's like a promise of more information to come without actually proof that anything you're saying is reliable, and that's the thing that these back and forths and these, like, long attempts to verify if time is of the essence. There was a question we had from the person earlier in the chat that said, "How long does it take to receive a reward?" Well, it takes a hell of a long time if you can't even if you're having to go back and forth and just provide proof that you're actually not full of crap.
Yeah, no, I completely agree, and I hope they don't pay anything until there's some type of standard met, because that could cause more issues than good as well,
Mhm,
because you're going to have people flooding in with these bogus tips or bogus reports and
mhm,
being paid. So I don't think the family is going to do that, and I don't think anyone else is going to do that. But
mhm.
I do feel that some of these reports, that is the motivation for them, is to,
Mhm.
in a hope that they will get paid.
Yeah, and what it actually does, I mean, it complicates the investigation for sure, in the sense that every every time that these things are reported and someone's having to double check and just determine whether they're bogus or not. But and not only that, I mean, like for the people that are filing these bogus reports, like that's a crime in itself. And so they've
Right.
made themselves a part of this. They've made themselves a part. They're actually a part of the case now, whether it's true or not. And so they've either committed a crime and are offering something truthful, or this is not true and they've committed a crime. And so,
Right, and, I'm sure that's kind of the short-sighted part of this, that
Mhm.
people don't think of that. They think of this as a potential moneymaker, and not, "Oh, I could also be arrested for
Mhm.
filing a false claim." Um, Hold on, we got another comment. Does "if you look in the right place, you'll find it" means investigators search that area, or PR?
I think those kinds of comments are crap, because I don't think that's someone who's serious about actually getting money, because this is like a version of you're getting a little bit warmer, or like Marco Polo, or
Right.
like something. Like, why play those games? Like, I know that when you watch like procedurals on TV, sometimes there are these like mastermind criminals who are just toying with the police and they're having this back and forth power exchanges. In real life, this is if any, I don't think people even play those. There are instances where people have, right. The Zodiac is famous example, and others, but that's a little bit different. If you want to engage in those kind of power games, that level, that's a very, very dangerous game to play, and it's one that typically doesn't have a high reward a, a kind of reward benefit that comes from that, especially if your goal is something as simple as not like an abstract, just feeling superior or powerful, but you want money. Like it just feels like the long back and forth potentially exposes you to some slippage that might reveal your identity and doesn't help you get paid really quickly if that's your goal.
Right. Exactly. And that does not, you playing a hot and cold is
Right.
not going to get you paid. It's not going to get you a reduced sentence. But it does line up with, a dumbass that is at Starbucks
Right.
with his, venti latte,
Right.
and he's got his burner phone that he bought from Walmart,
Right.
emailing this stuff out and getting off on it. Um, but that's not going to work out well for him eventually. I mean, I
Right.
don't think that the FBI or any of the other investigative agencies are just going to let these things slide and say, you know what, we realize that you made a mistake. I think that these are going to be federal charges coming down on them.
And I'm also skeptical about the authenticities letters, just for the reason, for those that are kind of we appreciate your comments here, popping these in. And but like I think if when you think about the type of person, let's say if this was truly a medical emergency that wasn't a planned kidnapping, or it was a planned kidnapping that went badly really quickly, I like if her death, if we take the example first and just hypothetically assume that they weren't planning to um, kill her, but they were breaking in, whether it's for drugs or something else, and she had some kind of medical emergency. I don't think the person that plans that specific type of crime is going to, they're probably going to have an oh shit moment. Maybe they get rid of the body someplace that they are familiar with, because that's what people tend to do. They either get rid of the body either close to the actual crime scene, or they take the body to some place that they have some high degree of confidence that they can kind of get rid of it without being seen because it's familiar to them. Right. But I don't think the person in that scenario would be the person that's, oh, I'm gonna play this game. You're getting hotter, colder. Like she may or may not be dead, and like
Right.
that. Like I don't think it's that person. And now, if it's someone who was attempting to abduct her, and the abduction just went sideways, like we were saying earlier, I still find I'm very skeptical after so many things. Let's say if they had this plan where there's a door in the back, there's a ring camera there. Like after so many things have gone wrong, the idea that you're going to pivot by in this really clumsily written like ransom attempt, I would be more inclined to think that those people would just like really just abandon the whole thing and want to never be heard from again versus sending lots of very cryptic ransom notes. Now, if it was from them, I'd be more inclined to believe this. They said, look, here's a video we've transmitted to TMZ because we know it'll be widely circulated. Here's an actual video that you can verify of Nancy Guthrie, a video we took on the last day she was live after we kidnapped her. Send $1 million, $4 million to this particular crypto, and I will tell you the location of where she's buried.
Right.
That would make sense to me. But playing this back and forth game, it doesn't really feel like they're serious about getting paid very quickly.
Yeah. And another angle on this is that it's not like the police don't have anything. I mean, you've
Right.
got a picture of a person and a description of clothing and a
Mhm.
general height and weight
Right.
that's been publicly released. We don't know if they have more. So
Mhm.
it's not like this person has completely got away with it.
Right.
And so that's kind of another point to this is, do you really want to be drawing attention to yourself
Right.
if you're responsible for a death? If
Right.
you're not
And
getting paid? So
also, yeah, no, exactly. Yeah, and you're not getting paid. You're
and
potentially drawing attention.
150 days have gone by.
A lot of time has
So
gone
we've
by.
had 150 days, you
Right.
haven't gotten paid,
Mhm.
and it you know that I I hate to say this, but if they if Nancy's found
Mhm.
It's going to be likely, unless she's in just the wide open desert and predation has happened,
Mhm.
that there's going to be evidence on her body and on her clothing.
Yeah, in some
So
kind of
it's
way. Yep.
not to your advantage if you're involved to help the police find that.
Right.
Like, that's not going to help you get away if that's your goal. Now,
Right.
the only way that you get helped out is if you were loosely involved, like if it was your boyfriend that did it
Mhm.
and he brought Nancy back and maybe you helped dispose of the body
Mhm.
somewhere, in one of those scenarios, then yeah, it's advantageous to say, this is what happened. I do not want to be involved in this. This is where the
Right.
body is. I'm willing to be cooperative. But being cooperative is going to the police and reporting that, not reporting it to a news agency.
Yeah, that's exactly right, and I think that the likelihood that if this case is solved, and I think it eventually will be, um, only because I feel like we've had, I feel like I don't know the extent to which the FBI and the Pima County have conducted interviews in this case or looked at suspects around those areas. They're there, but I think about the Delphi, Indiana case, and in that case, they interviewed so many people, and Richard Allen was one of the many people that they interviewed, right? And it was a big case that had attracted a lot of resources and attention. There was a video that was far more grainy than what we have of the suspect in like 4K from this ring camera, and so I have to believe that, and if there's two people involved, I think the chances this potentially something eventually comes out where it's solved, even the sense that they just find her. I think that's becomes more likely because I think that two people, you're also thinking about all the people in their orbit and circuit. If that's true, if it's two people, that they can keep a secret, never allude to, or no one in their orbit ever becomes suspicious that they could be involved, I think the probability of that starts to go down. Right.
Right. And I don't know if it was one or two people, but
We don't. Yeah.
right. I would doubt that if it was one person,
Hmm.
that he didn't tell a single soul about this, or
Hmm.
that there was not a person that knew that he was going out to that area to, rob someone or break into a home.
Right.
And I'm sure too that people, because I personally believe that he is local to that area.
Me too. Yeah.
I think that he bought his clothes in that backpack at that Walmart,
Yep.
and I
Yep.
would bet that he's got a drug problem, and he has a record for breaking. That is just my guess.
And I don't think she's likely that far from the house. So
Yeah, I don't believe that she's in Mexico now.
yeah, no,
Um,
no, no.
but
If this was an accident, keep in mind driving around like we don't know exactly how soon the medical emergency happened, but there's only a few drops of blood in her house. But if it was a medical emergency that occurred in their possession, let's say while she's in the car or something else, it takes a special type of person, and most people are not going to feel comfortable driving around for long periods of time after doing something goes that turns that where it takes an unplanned twist with just like a body in their car driving around for long distances.
plus, this happened in the early morning hours. We
Right.
know that her pacemaker went out. I believe it was at 1:45 a.m.
Yeah.
I may be incorrect on that, but it's around that time. And so you're gonna get rid of that before the morning comes, unless
Mhm.
you had something so close by and for some reason you wanted to keep her body around.
Mhm.
Which, if the goal is ransom, maybe that's a possibility.
Mhm.
But if your
Yeah.
goal is to just not get caught, then look, you've got a lot of desert around, and that would be a hard area to search,
Right. And I think that's most likely.
especially if she
Yeah.
was just dropped out in the middle of nowhere,
Mhm.
her body. Um, and then you've got to deal with predation.
Right. I mean, and this is one of those interesting things. If we think about the Gretchen Fleming case, when we've talked about very risky to take an elderly, let's see what Justin said, very risky to take an elderly woman with no passport and her pajamas across border. Yeah, I think it's very unlikely she went across the
Right.
border. I just don't believe that. I think that, so I'll give you another example, Justin. We talked about a few weeks ago. There was an episode of the Gretchen Fleming case that we covered that you can go back and listen to. And one of the interesting things about that case was for a long time, this, young woman that was, um, last seen exiting a bar with a guy named Preston Pierce, who was a former law enforcement officer. He was the main suspect from the FBI and local law enforcement. He was recently arrested finally, but everyone kind of knew where that he was likely responsible. But West Virginia is a big rural. I mean, it's a very rural state, and so it's like 80% rural, right? And so one of the interesting things in retrospect was that when they found her body, it was found by a squirrel hunter. So it was just like kind of found randomly. But when it was found, the area where she was buried was close to a route that Preston Pierce, the man who was likely responsible, who's been arrested, where the area it was part of the route that he used to drive on his beat when he was a law enforcement in that particular county. And so he went to an area that he was familiar with. And so I think if this person is local, like Cameron was saying, um, I think that it is challenging because the topography of the desert and everything else makes it really hard to. I mean, it's not going to leave as many traces. It changes over more frequently, but I think if we have even a person of interest or some people that are there, we can probably start to narrow down the areas just based on those spaces that they would be comfortable or familiar moving within.
Yeah, and we've got another comment about if it is a robbery gone wrong, that they believe the body is nearby. You know what this reminds
Yeah.
me about
Yeah.
the Preston Pierce case as well? Is that in that case, there's very little information
Right.
that the police were putting out, and they were working hand in hand with the FBI. And I said it on the show. People have to go back and listen to it, but they did a phenomenal job working with the local agency, working with the FBI and the U.S. Marshals and the Attorney General's office, and but they did not do a lot of. They didn't even release when her body was found.
Right. They kept it under
Her
wraps for like
body was
5
found
months or something.
in
Yeah.
right, 5 months after they did not let everyone know about her body being found until they had actually gone to the grand jury and indicted him, and they actually arrested him in Asheville, North Carolina, with the
Right.
help of the US Marshals. And so they did all this with holding on to this critical information. And I would bet that in this case, that if her body was found, it would be all over every news channel.
I believe
Like,
that
that
too.
would get
Yeah.
leaked out somehow.
It would. Yeah.
Um, but that just kind of goes back to my point of it's not a requirement to share this information that may seem valuable to us
Right.
or answer our questions.
Well, it's also one of these cases where the FBI is not really taking the lead on this case. I mean, the
Right.
Parkersburg
They're an
Police
assist
Department
agency.
in West Virginia, I mean, Parkersburg maybe technically had the lead, but all of the warrants that were done in this case were done through the federal court system. They were FBI warrants. And so it seemed the FBI played a very big part in that investigation. And I suspect we'll learn more about the role they played as you know, we go to trial in the next year. But in this case, the Pima County Sheriff has made a point of really exercising jurisdiction, providing the updates. The FBI is kind of, at least publicly, is kind of taking the lead from him in this case. I've said many times before when we were on there, I don't know why he would want it at this point. It seems like a big resource drain for a county to kind of manage. I don't know why he would. I'm surprised he doesn't see it as much responsibility as possible to the FBI, who has more resources. Particularly, like, while we do not think that she went across the border, like Justin was referencing, if there's even a possibility of that, like, that's so far beyond like what you can really investigate as a county sheriff. Just let the FBI take it. let let the feds have it at this point. It's and I'll say this one more thing, Cameron, before you jump in too, that one of the things that makes me very deeply skeptical about this case was they did leak early on, for those of you that followed it, that they were beginning investigative genetic genealogy. This was literally like weeks into the public investigation.
Right.
And that was a statement that was given by law enforcement. And they confirmed that they were starting that. That was so bizarre to me. And I'll maintain, many months later now, that that's so bizarre, because that's typically a last resort and it's incredibly time consuming. It involves going back hundreds of years in many cases and slowly working your way forward. It is something that is done as a last resort, typically where you have some DNA that you have a reasonable belief that it belongs to the perpetrator, and that's the only avenue you have to identify who they might be. And the fact that they started this so many weeks into it just made absolutely no sense to
Right.
me.
That was also when they had 1,000 agents working on this.
Yeah, that's true.
And so you had more than, and what you're saying about the homicide investigation is the FBI actually does not investigate a lot of homicides.
They don't. Yeah.
What they do is they are the assist agency that uses the BAU in the forensics department and the technical side with the cell phones. Like, they are great at that,
Mhm.
but they actually don't do a lot of sitting down with the suspect, going through interviews. I mean, if you look at the
Right.
Long Island serial killer that was just arrested, that was majority the local departments conducting those interviews. And during part of that, they use the FBI for assistance. But
Yeah.
for the guys that are actually sitting down, and that's kind of the troubling thing about this case, is you've got a more or less a smaller agency. And from what I've heard, I
Mhm.
don't know how much truth is in this, but some people are saying that the investigators that were assigned to this case did not have very much experience investigating homicides, that these were younger detectives,
Mhm.
and that at first there's some rift between them and working with the FBI. We know that they didn't use the FBI's lab
Right.
for the testing. They wanted to use their own lab, which was so they sent it off to their lab in Florida, which I understand it was a reputable lab, but I would assume
Mhm.
that it's probably, excuse me, it's probably easier to work with having the evidence in Quantico and
Mhm.
getting that information back to your agents a lot faster, if you go through the FBI's lab.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. I mean, the FBI is a phenomenal lab. They have phenomenal people working in the behavioral analysis unit, the profilers that are there. They do phenomenal work with RICO cases, and they take the lead on cases and have automatic jurisdiction on cases involving like murders that happen on native reservations.
Right.
But outside of that, I mean, they are. This is a misconception. I think it's just important to point out, like, FBI agents are not working that many murder cases. That's not what they specialize in. That's not what they do primarily. So if you're in a city like Los Angeles, you're the homicide unit in Los Angeles, or you're the detective with the NYPD, or Chicago, like our friend
Yeah, we
Michelle
had Michelle
Wood.
Wood on
Like,
last week. Yeah.
these detectives, they're working 18 to 20 homicides, right? That are like, have a portfolio of these. That's not an FBI agent. Like, these detectives have a wealth of experience where that's all they're doing is working homicides every single day. That is not what the FBI does.
Yeah, she actually had a good point about this. She was a homicide detective for, I believe, 20 plus years. Now she
Yeah.
just retired a few weeks ago. And what she said is what they would bring in the FBI for is when they dealt with a lot of homicides involving gangs.
Yeah.
And if they could not get the suspect based on the evidence they had, a lot of times it was because witnesses would refuse to testify. Then they would use the FBI to go after that gang and those individuals for white collar stuff like RICO and
Mm.
build cases that way. That way, you're removing them off the street and they're getting charged with stuff that's going to give them decades long in jail, but you just don't have that local murder charge.
Right. So they're not like the hard nosed, homicide
Right.
detective
They're not the
who's just a
salty detective.
street
Right.
smart,
With the
recent.
fedora,
Yeah, that's
chain
not.
smoking.
Those detectives do exist, but they're
Oh,
not the
yeah.
FBI. They're
Yeah.
not the FBI though.
I met a
So,
few.
no, and it's like, and it is one of those things where, yeah, it's and I guess it's a very complicated situation where you have, if you were to have, let's say, a murder takes place where it's in a county where you have local investigators that, let's say, in a particular area that don't have a lot of experience with homicides, and they're being assisted with the FBI. The FBI is going to be really great with evidence and logistics and coordinating lots of things, but yeah, just in terms of just a homicide investigation, you you know in general, I would say I would rather have that most seasoned detective with NYPD or Chicago Police Department or Los Angeles Police Department assigned.
Right.
So,
Absolutely. All right. Well, I think we've beaten this up for all that we can. Do you have anything more to add before we wrap things up?
no, I'm looking forward to seeing what's the next ransom note that TMZ reports. I suspect there'll be one next week, so stay tuned. We might be back talking
Yeah.
about the latest ransom note, and if you all have any thoughts that are watching this about the ransom notes or what your thoughts on this case are, just drop them in the comments. We're really curious because my mind isn't really made up. I don't really have any. I think it's impossible to have a really defined opinion about this case, except for that I think it's unlikely that she's in Mexico. I think it is I think it's unlikely she's still alive, and I also think it's unlikely that many of these notes are authentic for the reasons we've described tonight. But that's about
Yeah.
it. I don't really have many other pretty solid opinions about this case.
Yeah. We'll keep on doing the show as long as stuff keeps on coming in. Uh, we will be doing another show next week. Got a few ideas for it. I was going to see if you will come on before I announce it, but that will be Thursday at 8:30. Again, that will be a live show, so make
Cool.
sure that people tune into that. Brian, would you like to plug this book, A Murder on Campus, The Professor, the Cop, in North Carolina's Most Notorious Cold Case?
Yeah, so a case that we do have some definite opinions on is the Virginia Olsen case from 1973. This is the only murder to ever occur on the campus of the University of North Carolina at Asheville. It is a cold case in North Carolina, and Cameron and I wrote this book a year ago. It did extremely well, and it's been the only book that has brought out information from the actual information about the prime suspect, who we name in this, and also has case documents that were largely lost. So if you are interested in cold cases, give this book a read. It's available on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Books A Million. The audiobook was done by Gary Williams, who is the voice of the Oakland Raiders for the NFL. So we have, and he did a really good job with that. So that's out there on Apple iBooks and Audible. So give it a read, give it a listen. It's worth your time. It's a good story.
All right. And where can people find you?
BrianSantanaAuthor.com. That is up and that's my website. So if you're welcome to sign up for a listserv to get updates about anything I'm working on, there's links to all of the articles that I've written over the past 2 years that are available. If you want to hear more about my work in a true crime classroom, if you want to hear about some of the other cases I've covered in smaller form, it is there. And also at True Crime Professor. There we go. On Instagram is the easiest way to get a hold of me. Follow me and get a sense of kind of I've got information about a new book I'm working on right now. And there we go. Another not a cold case, a case that was recently solved after 53 years. So the Deborah Elizabeth Espy story. This is coming out through the History Press in the next year, and I work really closely and interviewed both the family of the murderer and the victim's family as well, and law enforcement attached to the case. So it's a fascinating book that you'll want to read when it comes out.
All right. Well, if you want to support me, you can start off by liking and subscribing to Santana True Crime. You can also follow me on Instagram and any other social media at Santana True Crime. I appreciate everyone tuning in. Again, hopefully we'll see you on Thursday at 8:30. Thank you all again, and good night.